Welcome, lovely brothers and sisters. Welcome to part 2 of the beginning of tyranny. And everything has its roots, so also tyranny. And if we know that tyranny is in actuality full-blown psychopathy, then we understand where it comes from. So we start with today with the story about the Lady of the Lake, and we continue on as far as possible, because I hope to do this in 3 parts in actuality. First and foremost. All right, so let us start. I'm still reading from Wes Penre's papers, the second level of learning book. This study material is now available in book form. All right, the Lady of the Lake. All seemed to go well for quite a while, and eventually the Syrian workers in the mines and plantations were released and allowed to return home. Left were just the beast, whom Enki and Nin called the Appa. And there we have the word ape from Appa. So if we go look back to the book of Revelation, in where it is being stated about the beast, if we now know that the entire Bible story is distorted and completely inverted, then in actuality you can say that the book of Revelation contains bits and pieces of this story about the Appa, and that the beast is not really what people think it is. And if people think that this beast still needs to come, then they need to look closer to home, because the beast is already there. And so now we get more and more to this understanding of learning how to read such a book as the Bible, because the Bible is absolutely not holy in no way, shape, or form. It is a twisted story. It's in actuality an inverted story. And so it's all those people who think it is the word of God. It's absolutely not the word of God. And the God that they are worshipping is in actuality a psychopath known as Marduk, which is a Syrian king. Well, Syrian overlord, better said. He is not yet king. He is striving to become one. So left were just the beast, whom Enki and Nin called the Appa, where we have the word ape from. However, one day Enki traveled to the mines to see how his creation was doing, and was very shocked to see how badly they were treated. So Enlil had no respect for the Appa and drove them to their limits and whipped their black bodies bloody. Many of them died and others were in terrible shape. Enki was furious and told Enlil that this was not what they had agreed upon. Well, if you know that Enlil is a psychopath, then a psychopath doesn't give a damn about life. So yeah, that what Enki was saying was in actuality to deaf man's ears. So Enlil defended himself by saying that he needed to meet his quota, and these stupid beasts were supposed to be able to meet them. So if they were too lazy to meet them, he had to make them. Enki threatened to stop producing workers if Enlil didn't change his attitude. But Enlil, the Lord of Command, said that these beings were just animals, and this is still unto the day of today that they see us humans. We are nothing more than just animals to them. And whom are them? These are the Syrian overlords. So anyway, who cares? And King Anu wouldn't be too pleased if the production stopped because Enki refused to produce more workers, especially now that Syrian workers had left Nova Terra, because the Syrian workers themselves were lazy assholes. Enki had probably never been this furious in his whole life, and he left Enlil's office before he did something he would regret. He returned to his laboratory and sat down to think. His hands were tied. He felt obligated to produce slave workers who would be treated worse than any animal would. And I can't say I understand all the moral aspects of Enki, for so far an almost full-blown narcissist knows what morals are, um, or how his thought process really worked, albeit I can still speculate from studying the consequences of his decisions. At this exact point in time, one would think he could pack his bags and go somewhere else to another planet and continue his research there, where his oppressive brother didn't have any influence over him, and King Anu couldn't command him. After all, he was from Orion and not Assyrian. Was it his marriage to Nin-Ursag that kept him there? And Nin-Ursag is a Syrian person. So she comes from the Syrian star system. Given that she is Syrian and wants to accomplish what her father wanted her to do, and given Enki's apparent affinity for his stepfather, could that have something to do with why he decided to proceed past this point? We can only guess, but Enlil consumed slaves faster than Enki and Nin could clone them. So cloning is ancient old. Modern, so-called modern, people today, scientists and whatever you have, they are questioning things about cloning, if it is all ethical and whatever. Well, cloning is eons old. So it's nothing new. As everything in this world is not new at all. This was a full-time job for a whole team of scientists, and they still couldn't catch up because Enki did not have the equipment to work any faster. So instead of figuring out how to speed up the cloning process, he realized that the solution must be to let their creation reproduce sexually and introduce polarity onto the scene. So now we get the deeper understanding that polarity is in actuality also artificial. And in actuality, polarity is not how can you say it, not natural. Everything is created in laboratories, so to say, whole life. Enki returned from Mesopotamia, where he had been working for a while, to the high mountain in Siberia, upon which the sky met the earth, and there was this gorgeous, deep and clear blue salt water lake. This is where he set up his laboratory, and this time he was alone to begin with. It was time for him to accomplish his dream to create a sexual human being which had which had the fire of the mother goddess in them. Through the depth of the Ka, he wanted to insert this special divine fire into the sexual feminine body he wished to create. This place that he had chosen was not random. Up here was where all the elements met. It was extremely electrical, with constant thunderstorms and incredible lightning bolts penetrating land and water. So one night, when the elements were all loose, Enki stood out in the rain and directed the lightning bolts to hit the lake one after the other. The electricity was incredible, and when the lake was charged to its maximum, the Orion master geneticist collected water samples and took them to his lab. He had vast quantities of quartz available, and his crystals and his mess were there with all the information to guide him, including everything he had learned from his mother, the Queen of Orion. Outside, the thunderstorms continued in the same furious manner. And there she was, the Lady of the Lake, the first sexual human female created by Enki's own DNA, but also that of the Luus, Syrians, and Homo neanderthalensis, and a few other star races. By saying this means that we are carriers of more than just one type of genetics in us. We have a mishmash of genetics in us from several star races and also from beings like Enki, Isis, and so on. So, but the most crucial thing of them all, she had the fire of the mother goddess. She was the Eve, the first genetically engineered sexual human female. Enki was very pleased. The Eve was beautiful and dark-skinned, just like her asexual cousins. Excited by his success, Enki continued his work to genetically alter Eve to create a manipulated female by adding lots of testosterone, among other things. This manipulated female became the Adamus, the first sexual male. So males are inverted females. Enki let the two copulate. At first it failed, but after a few adjustments they could reproduce and have offspring, and all of them had the fire of the goddess. However, female bodies, as it were, generally had more spiritual and psychic abilities than male bodies, a truth that holds even today. Don't we still say that females have better intuition than men? And there is for certain truth to that. The first time I heard the story of the Lady of the Lake is in the above fashion was on Robert Morningsky's website. But the Pleiadians also back it in many accounts. Here they say, your hypothalamus regulates the temperature and water in your body. You are water. You understand electrified water. The elements and balance of ocean water match the blood in your human body. Humans were made from the ocean. This is one of the greatest secrets of creation. So we are made from the ocean. Interesting. What is this dam? It is all of the ideas, structures, and belief systems that hold the waters of consciousness together. You are made from water. And the water in our bodies also is responding to our emotions. So I guess we can assume that via our hypothalamus, we can regulate and control our own emotions. Dan Winter also says in his book, The Return of Enki, Kids Become Stars. Imagine you are Enki learning from a dragon queen mother. Here, ID, here son is how you create life. Take lightning and learn to tie it all up in a ball. Something about that first dimple which turns the skinny tornado like lightning bolt into the torus donut is when the whip cracks, implosion starts. It becomes self-reentrant and self-organizing. And fiat lux, you have life itself. What was a lightning bolt now appears like a floating ball, really a toroidal. Science spent lifetimes studying the nature of ball lightning, never imagining that the answer required understanding the origin of life itself as a symmetry turn inside out. This is powerful information because it is how the fire is made. The fire looks like an orb, and when attaching to a 3D body, she, the feminine orb, stretches herself out to form an avatar or a light body around the physical one. Have you ever wondered what these orbs are that some people manage to catch on a film, but were not there before the photo was taken? The so-called lightning of the camera flash makes these dancing fires of consciousness visible if they are present around the photographer. The legend goes that in a position between heaven and earth, where the elements can be fully expressed, life can be created. The Pleiadians agree with what we have said above, namely that lightning is the force of the mother goddess. Enki was able to create, discover, and assemble molecules, encoding them with identity, frequency, and electrical charge to make life. Thus Enki had created a fire that not only came from the universe around him, but was created directly from the womb of the Ka, the spiritual universe, the mother goddess. Thus this fire had divine origins. By separating this fire and mixing the molecules in a manner only a highly skilled Kadistu could achieve, Enki created mind and personality, and all of this could be embedded in this new sexual form of humankind. This fire had the exact origin as that of the Namlu'u, whose genes he also used to create the vessels for this powerful fire. Each fire stemming from its own oversoul of fire was then split into many, many fragments, each one as big and powerful as the other. It was like having a lit torch and then using it to lit up another torch. Once the fire takes hold, it is still as powerful as the fire of the first torch, because of the manner in which Enlil and his Syrian team had locked the planet into 3D and linear time. Enki spread these fire fragments out over the vistas of time so that each fire could have more than one experience. So Enki knew that each vessel would die in a certain number of years, and the fire would leave the body and be recycled. But by also being fragmented over a long time period, the oversoul, which is the real you, would have a greater experience according to Enki's thoughts. This was Enki's experiment, which I want to call Project Elohim from here on. So in actuality, you can say we are this Project Elohim. The only problem was that the oversoul was waiting and waiting, but almost no fragments were reporting back to her because her fragments were stuck here. It is like having a giant motherfish in one aquarium and putting all its baby fish in another. When the baby fish grow up and die, they cannot go back to the mother fish, assuming that was the purpose, because the walls of the aquarium are in the way. Sometimes a fire fragment or two slips through the grid and can return to the oversoul, but this is quite rare. Most fragments go back into the so-called tunnel of light, which is, of course, this false tunnel of light, which is a hologram, get implanted with amnesia and false memories, and get shot back down to earth in a new body again. So now, however, during the nanosecond from 1987 to 2012, we have had the chance to heal along the lines of time as I described it in level 1 of the Wes Penre papers. And that will eventually be the end of recycling-reincarnation. Once a fire fragment gets it and can escape after body death, the grip of the Syrian overlords cannot keep her trapped anymore. She is free to return, and if she has worked on herself spiritually, she can bring the other fragments with her, or let them complete their cycle. Once all soul fragments have reported back to the oversoul, the being is whole again and can continue her journey by doing whatever she wants. This is why it is so essential to work on our own spiritual growth and healing. Otherwise, we won't be able to complete the cycle at this time. More on this in upcoming papers. What Enki apparently didn't think about when he spread out the fire fragments of the oversouls was that the fragments would be stuck here and recycled and not able to reconnect with their, between quotation marks, higher self. Due to the Syrian entrapment, it often seems like Enki was only thinking in the moment without first considering the consequences of his actions. How familiar, because in today's life, many things that the governmental institutions and body and all those whom are manipulating and controlling us, they also do not think about short-term and long-term consequences of their actions. An explanation for why this happened could be that here on Earth it was harder to reach across the dimensions as Aryans and Syrians were used to doing, um, better said, due to Earth's dense environment. Even the so-called gods were trapped here due to Enlil's grid and the closing down of the stargates. But with a little effort he could have done it and seen that this creation was bound to suffer on many, many, many levels before they could set themselves free, if ever be able to set themselves free. Eventually he seems to have realized this, but then it was already too late. Far too late. His solution to this problem, as we shall see later, was not that brilliant either. So Enki is indeed not such a brilliant being at all. Okay, his only brilliance is that he is a so-called good geneticist, but that is it. That's the only thing he is good at, but the rest, he is lousy. Um, so his solution to this problem, as we shall see later, was not brilliant either, and some would say it only made the problems and matters worse. So integrating this between quotation marks Project Elohim with earlier experiments. Enki's new creation was met with much skepticism and critique from the Syrian overlords. They understood the dilemma with cloning if it had to be done so quickly. Each generation of cloned Appa would be an inferior copy of the one before, and the whole species would deteriorate over time, producing weaker workers. No one seemed to question Enlil's way of treating Enki's creation. However, and very little consideration was put into the fact that Nin and Enki had to work themselves off to total exhaustion, to the brink of burning out, to catch up with Enlil's quick consumption of human prototypes. Enlil, of course, did not like the idea of a sexual human for many reasons. He didn't want them to be distracted by sexual needs, and he didn't like that they had been allowed to be introduced to the tree of life and the secrets of the so-called gods. It was alarming and shouldn't be allowed. So these beings were supposedly made to be workers - slaves and nothing more. Now they had been allowed to taste the elixir of the so-called gods. Enlil burst out. I truly hope you didn't give them our longevity too. In fact, Enki hadn't. He knew it would not be accepted, and he told the council that Adamus would be a short-lived Adamus. Still 1,000 years, but 1,000 years was still a blink of an eye from the god's perspective. Besides, some of the humans like Abraham and other Enlil/Yahweh's patriarchs needed their longer lifespan to be able to play out the role the gods had assigned them to play out. So this gives a whole new insight in all these persons, better said, in the whole Bible story. To Enlil's dismay, the new species, which they called the Lulu, the mixed being among the star races, was accepted. It was a sarcastic and quite humiliating term, classifying them in the same category as low conscious animals. There was one crux, however. They were again too clever, and Enlil sought to reduce their intelligence. This time, for some reason, the council voted against Enlil, who, in his fury, said that at least the copulation had to be supervised, and it must be supervised by him and Lil himself, and males and females needed to be separated so they didn't go berserk on each other. On these 2 points, the council agreed, and Lil calmed down a little. Enki had mixed feelings. He didn't like to be supervised by his oppressive brother. Project Elohim was his experiment, and his brother knew next to nothing about cloning, but Enki did not dare to speak up, afraid to lose the little influence he had. And as we can see nowadays, in all in how we are completely being distracted and derailed, and what the overlords do to keep us numb and dumb is incredible. So this is ancient, if not eons old game. Keep humans busy with all sorts of things so that they will not use their intelligence and so become more intelligent than the overlords themselves are. So this game is an eons old game that we see still being played out. By the many levels of distraction and derailment the overlords are producing to keep us busy and to make sure that we do not live life ourselves and in a way that we ourselves want to live life. Enlil remained in charge of the mining process, and Enki oversaw the plantations, ensuring the production of wheat, essential herbs, and vegetables. During the day, males and females had to be separated on the field, and Enki was sure they were separated in the mines as well. He knew well how Enlil would treat them there, where Enki could supervise, and this aggravated him, but he still decided to continue the experiment here on Earth, despite the suffering his creation had to endure. At times, an excited Enlil showed up on the plains with a line of chained Lulus, whom he thought were standing out by being strong, obedient, and just intelligent enough to understand his every command. In other words, from Enlil's viewpoint, a less intelligent Lulu was a better Lulu. So now you get to understand why they have changed the entire educational system and make sure that the children of today will become workers for the future. And now you also understand why they do everything to make sure that every form of humanness and human creativity is being taken out of this world. And we can already see this in so many aspects of life. Walk in the shops and you see that more shops becoming humanless, synthetic in presence, in synthetic in experiences, and all everything that can bring some lifelessness in things is being taken out, and this will become more and more and more. The overlords want to have a sterile world, no humanness, and they want to have us into a new level of enslavement. So this is the reason why they do not want to have us anything for ourselves. No hobbies, no things we like, no books, no whatever. Not even an own home. So this is one of the main reasons why all these agendas of the World Economic Forum, this Agenda 21, which is the agenda of the 21st century, is being rolled out through all these ridiculous so-called green agendas, which are not green at all. All these agendas of the World Economic Forum are based on total destruction of every life form on this planet and the complete destruction of humanness and thus humanity. He wanted them to reproduce so he could obtain strong, obedient offspring for the minds. Enki put the chosen ones together in a cave, 2 by 2, under his brother's supervision. Enlil told him who was going to mate with whom, and there in the caves offspring were made. So Enlil was not the chief administrator of Terra Nova when the Titans were gone, and was also in charge of all projects that were going on by Syrians, except Project Elohim, which Enki had managed to talk himself into remaining in charge of, although Enlil had the last word when deciding who was allowed to reproduce. Enlil stayed at the plantations for quite a while, long enough to think it was appropriate to build a big cabin on one of the hills from where he could overlook the production down in the valley. The sun was extremely hot and the plantations had to be watered constantly by a sprinkler system, which also kept the workers relatively cool. Under Enki's supervision, they were handed food 3 times a day. But now, when Enlil came visiting, that changed. The workers were fed once a day in the evening, and they all had to beg for it. Again, this created significant animosity between the brothers, and Enki spoke little to Enlil, while Enlil was at the plantations, where he sometimes stayed for extended periods, which annoyed Enki. As soon as his oppressive brother left, however, Enki allowed the males and females to join together and copulate in the evenings in the garden across the plantations. This was their only pleasure, which they appreciated to the fullest, and which also made them work harder during the days, only because they were happier and appreciated by their master. The first thing Enlil noticed was the increase in production, and for a while he thought that maybe he had been wrong and that sexual beings actually work harder. Still, he would not let Enki take credit for that. Of course not, because Enlil is a psychopath, and psychopaths do not like to share credits. So he told Enki that he needed the production to increase further. The demand was great, and he said Enki was not, and the demand was great, he said. So Enki was not stupid. He knew what went on in his brother's mind, but he couldn't do anything about it as long as Enlil was in charge. However, he still let the Lulus reproduce freely in the garden. But Enlil became suspicious because Enki had far too many workers in the plantations. Many of them were asexual, but something was not right. Several of them behaved differently, although they apparently tried to conceal it. They were more intelligent and far more aware of all the things that were happening. When he realized what Enki had done, he ran into his brother's office and started screaming and shouting and accusing him of breaking their agreement, and worse. Enki countered by yelling back, saying Enlil treated his creation worse than any animal, whipping them, screaming at them, hunting them down when they tried to hide, torturing them, killing them, and even eating them. And mind you, all this, what I'm naming here, is still going on unto the day of today. And all these labor camps that still are around in this world, in China, in the area of China, Alaska, and so on, in some parts of Russia, all these labor camps are in actuality still representing this Enlil regime. Nothing is gone. Nothing has changed in this world. It looks modern, but it is not. Only the what you can say, the decor has changed. That's it. But the rest stayed the same. So really, nothing has changed in this world for eons. Enlil said there's nothing wrong with that. Of course, he said that because a psychopath has no emotions and no feelings. So he does not see what he's doing wrong. After all, they are only Lulus and as such dispendable. The entire outbreak ended in a fist fight and the two had to be separated. When Enlil calmed down enough not to attack his brother, and with 4 strong reptilian guards holding him back, he wheezed between his teeth while catching his breath. I want all these filthy Lulus of yours out of the garden. The garden will from now on belong to those paying allegiance to me and who follow my commands. And now we come to the actual base root of the so-called 10 commandments in the Bible. These commandments are the commandments of Enlil. And all those whom are obeying these commandments, they are clueless in the fact that they are in actuality obeying Enlil / Marduk / the so-called God the Father / Jesus. You can take your misfits and let them free in the woods, he said to his brother Enki. I hope they will get killed by tigers and bears. I from here on declare the Garden of Eden my property. Enki gathered his creations, those willing to follow their creator, and departed into the forest. There were still quite a few sexual humans who were too afraid to follow Enki. However, Enlil had scared them in such a way that they didn't dare to leave the garden and to leave Enlil, because he told them that if they would leave the garden, they will be eaten directly by tigers or bears or whatever. He said it was extremely dangerous out there, with horrible monsters, demons, and man-eaters behind every tree, so they wouldn't survive a day out there. Out of fear, many Lulus remained with Enlil and became his obedient property. This was probably the time when most Syrians, and Enki as well, took on human bodies to blend in with the human population. So not every human is a human. Although it seems like the bodies they created for themselves were taller and perhaps even stronger than the ones used in the slave camps, we still see some reptilian artifacts from more recent times, which may be because not all of the gods changed body types or only did so when the old one ceased to function correctly. Some of the statues and statuettes we see may also depict Syrians and other star races manifesting in their avatars. And so uh, we can look in a different way to all these statues and statuettes that we see around us. All right, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Enki, on the other hand, decided to educate the smartest of the Lulus and teach them about their own history, the history of the gods and how they came to be. In other words, he gave them quite a lot from the tree of knowledge. However, he didn't teach everyone, and he didn't teach them everything. Not even Enki wanted the humans to become like the gods. He only wanted them to give them the taste and perhaps the ability to eventually set themselves free. He spent considerable time with his creation, observing and teaching it. He taught it how to create fire in the woods at night to keep wild animals away. So everything that we humans nowadays do have we learned, better said, our ancestors, our forebears have learned it from Enki himself. And this is also what is being stated in the book of Enoch. So he taught them which plants to eat and how to hunt. He even taught them to draw, an art they used to create cave paintings and stone carvings. Enki taught them basic survival skills, but the most intelligent of the Lulus he took aside and spent extra time with, teaching them more esoteric knowledge about astronomy, astrology, and the origins of the gods. This knowledge was kept secret within a secret society called the Sisterhood of the Snake, and another, the Brotherhood of the Snake, and both are still existing unto the day of today, although the Brotherhood of the Snake has become bigger. Many of the Sisterhood of the Snake organizations, they got unfortunately infiltrated and hijacked. But they're still there, composed solely of males whose purpose was to protect the females and their wisdom. So the Lulus he took aside to teach what later became shamanism. Shamanism is all about having yourselves connecting with the mother goddess. And so it's all about the wisdom of the feminine goddess, mother goddess. So the Lulus he took aside to teach what later became shamanism. And so shamanism was in actuality in the beginning mostly practiced by females, because the female body, again, is far more suitable for this than the male body is. So in actuality, shamanism is a feminine thing, but got hijacked and eventually became also something very dominant by males. And nowadays we see more male shamans than we see shamanesses. So the women need to come back to this and become a shamaness again. Because Enki, being an Aryan, better said from Orion, knew about the divine feminine. Although he supported his father, the Syrian king Anu, in many ways, he still loved his mother, the queen of the stars, and respected the power of the divine feminine. So he taught these special women the art and religion of shamanism, the religion of the mother goddess. That is what shamanism is, and let them learn how to practice it. To his excitement, Enki noticed that he had done a very good job over there at the lake on top of the Siberian mountain, because these human women were mighty and could quite easily be taught how to connect with the other 96%, the Ka, which is the spiritual universe. So shamanesses are able to have themselves connected with the 96% of the universe, because we are locked in the last 4% of the universe. And so make connection with the mother goddess herself. Although to a certain degree it concerned him, because if the Syrians happened to find out, they would definitely want to suck in that power. He knew his Syrian friends too well, so this was reason enough to keep even most of his own special creation ignorant. Therefore, Enki selected his own best shamans and had them practice, and when other women showed sufficient talent in the matter, he sometimes taught them as well. But he didn't want too many to know the secrets of the gods. So the Bible states that Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and this is associated with original sin. Well, there is no original sin in the first place, except in the eyes of some gods, like Enlil, who is Yahweh, who is Jehovah, and his clan, who wanted to keep mankind ignorant and afraid that they would become like the gods. If that is our original so-called sin, mankind is guilty as charged. However, in terms of the universe, it is called evolution. The tree of knowledge is the wisdom of learning about sexuality. The true tree of knowledge does not only teach you how to be intimate with a partner in general, that is something a sexual being can find out by themselves. The tree of knowledge has to do with sex magic and how to connect with the Ka, the spiritual universe, through the female orgasm and close intimacy between partners who love each other, as we talked about already in the first paper in level 2. This was learned at the beginning of time through shamanism. And here I come back to the fact that many Christians think that shamanism is paganistic. Well, it's not paganistic. And here we see how so many Christian believers do not understand what shamanism and actual paganism really is. And I have the idea that paganism is in actuality another form of shamanism too. So what I want to say is that all these believers would do a great job if they would self-inform and self-educate themselves, instead of going along with a storyline in a so-called holy book of which the storyline is completed inverted and distorted in many ways. A religion originating in the belt of Orion, of which Enki was aware. He initiated some of the women into these sacred rituals. This way, if each tribe had a shaman or two, these gifted women of fire could become multidimensional while still anchored and grounded in their bodies. If the tribe needed to know the outcome of critical decisions or the solution to a specific problem, the woman, better said women of fire, split and extended their fire across the dimensions by engaging in ecstatic dance and sacred sex to achieve the best possible outcome for the tribe's survival. So the best of them were highly successful and considered crucial to the tribe's survival. The men of the tribes protected the women of fire with their lives. The tree of life concerned the longevity of the gods. This was another piece of knowledge that Enlil and most Syrians did not want the Lulus and thus us to know. It concerned blood, the life elixir of the goddess, the S dash dash Ma. So S dash Ma. Again, the Pleiadians explain it best in one of their book, and I quote, in this version of creation, woman sprang from a man. This is not so. It is always the goddess who knows the scoop on making life because it is the goddess who carries the blood. So here, another piece of the Bible that was incorrect. Eve didn't came out of Adam, it was completely the other way around. Adam was the inverted Eve, because males are inverted females. The Bible relates the story of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge allows you to be informed. Sexual ability and practice equate to the tree of knowledge, the tree that humans were forbidden to eat from. They were forbidden to participate as well with the tree of life. So what is the tree of life? Many think that the tree of life is something that grows a fruit. It is rumored that through ingesting this fruit of the tree of life, you can gain immortality. In ancient times, it was understood that this fruit was the blood of the goddess. That was the fruit of the tree of life. Think of your body and your nervous system as a tree. The stories are not talking about fruits on trees, but to the fruits of the body, the secretions and substances that are indeed gifts of the gods. For eons, the gods have been steering you away from this knowledge. To have sex with a woman when she is on her blood time is one of the highest vibrations because you go through doorways into other realms. To share the blood is to take on the higher consciousness. Indeed, blood is one of the keys to longevity, menstrual blood of the goddess, in combination with monoatomic gold. This is how the gods, so-called gods, did it and still do. Here on earth, we also have access to the blood of the goddess through women's menses. The fire of the divine feminine still flows through her bloodstream today, more so than it does men. Because the female came first and men are just altered females. I.E. They were made out of females, not the other way around. like we have learned from distorted religions, or better known as religions. If I, better said, if a male has a genuine, loving relationship with a female and they have sex during her menstruation, they know how to enjoy magic sex through the female orgasm in the shamanistic way. The female is willing to share. The experience not only takes them to the 96% of the universe, but is also enhanced by the menses, and so is the longevity of the parties. One of the most powerful gifts a woman can give her man is to let him drink from her menstrual blood, because it may prolong his life, enhance his energy, and make it easier for him to connect with the world beyond four space/time. The blood was the elixir of the so-called gods, and legend goes that the gods killed the shamanic priestesses, drank their blood, and ate their major organs and glands to get the so-called personality of the shaman, and thus understand the knowledge these shamanic women held. This did not only happen on Earth. There was an old war between the genders that had taken place in this sector of the universe, where polarity and free will run. So, as usual, the ways of the gods were just brought down here. For hundreds or thousands of years, we have been taught that women's menses are dirty and you shouldn't have sex with her when she is having her period. Now it is easy to see how they have managed to manipulate us into thinking that we would better stay away from sex while our partner is having her period, when in fact this would be the best time to engage in that, except if you are planning on having children, of course. Also, the women's periods are the perfect time to have unprotected sex for those who prefer that. It is nature's way of saying now you can have sex without being pregnant. Want to be pregnant, then have sex when you are fertile. In ancient days, they didn't have any condoms or pills to prevent pregnancy. But when they had the proper knowledge, they knew when to have sex and when not, depending on the women's cycle. After teaching the most brilliant of the Lulus most of these things, Enki made them teachers who taught others they deemed worthy of the gods' knowledge. The rest remained largely ignorant. So whether it was Enki's intention or not, this was the beginning of elitism. Enki indeed bred bloodlines which were for more than others and far more than others who could understand the secrets, and later on he set them to rule over mankind. And these are the ones that we call oligarchs or cabal or whatever label we have given to them. But there are in actuality the Elites. So they became what we today call the global elite, Elite, the Illuminati, the international banking cartel, the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, and so on. And with this said, I have come to the end of part 2, and part 3 will begin the next time with the departure of a divine species, which is all about the last Namlu'us who decided to leave this world. Then we have the Cain and the Abel bloodlines, which was also an experiment. And then it's done. So this chapter will be 3 parts. All right. I sincerely hope that this information gives you food for thinking. Please ponder upon it and ask your own spirit to help you to get a more in-depth understanding of the information that you have listened to. Um, it is it's about time that we start to self-inform and self-educate ourselves, and so we become free, but also to pass this type of information on to others so that more people um, can shatter, so to say, their whole belief system and everything that has been taught to us. All right, I want to thank you for listening and tuning in through Facebook, through Rumble, and through YouTube. I wish you all a beautiful, joyful day filled with a lot of love, wisdom, truth, and knowledge, all coming from your own spirit. And let us listen to a nice piece of music um, created by Ben Sound. Let me see which one we had the last time. Okay, Slow Life, it is titled. I see you next time and have a great day.